I'll try to speak up over the furnace. I'll walk over and do it. Yeah. Well, once again, thank you. It's Bob Kochan is my name. I'm the principal and president of Forensic Marine Investigations International. We are a subsidiary of Forensic Analysis and Engineering Corporation, which is based in Hampton, Virginia. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of stuff, but we're in 27 states as an engineering company. We have 50 people. We work all over the world. And yesterday morning, about this time, I was in Cape Canaveral on board a cruise ship at 80 degrees. And, you know, I got back here last night for this 28-degree weather. So I wanted to speak to you. Today, I want to bring up a subject that hopefully not many of you have actually had to be involved in. But I'd like a show of hands. Who of you have been involved in marina fires of any kind? A few. Multiple vessels or just the marina itself? Or the whole marina? Okay. Well, my condolences to each one of you, because it's one of those things that you really don't want to have to get into, especially if it's your carrier that winds up being responsible to pay the bill. Our job as a forensic engineering firm is to determine why something happened. We are unbiased, we're unrelated to anybody else. We could care less who calls us first. The goal is to solve the puzzle. Just like yourselves, you're out there to figure out, you know, to represent your client the best you possibly can and to generally minimize their expense and their cost. My job comes from a little different perspective. I really don't care how much it costs. Yes, I want to make my client happy, but generally what we're trying to do is get down to the root aspect of what caused the loss. So I hope we move forward here. Let's try this one. We have a problem. We have a technical problem, but it's not moving forward.
Yeah. I don't quite know what we did to make it work either.
Sorry for the interruption. All right, here we go. Well, it sat too long, I guess.
You'll be fine.
All right. You can read this. Basically, our firm started in 1976. We were in Texas. I grew it and moved it ultimately to Hampton, Virginia after a stop in Raleigh, North Carolina. The one thing that we are proud of, very proud of, is that we have the largest contingent of International Association of Marine Investigators, certified marine investigators on our payroll. We have 6 of them, and that is the highest number of any firm in the world, for that matter. I used to be on the executive board, so I happen to have inner knowledge of that. But today we're going to be talking about a particular fire. And unfortunately, it happened on February 29th of last year. It was in Urbanna, Virginia, which is on a little creek off of the Rappahannock River, about a third of the way north of the Norfolk area at the bottom of the Chesapeake Bay. This was a picture taken about 7 a.m. You can see the fire department ladder truck doing its best to smolder, put out the fire that's smoldering. This was an interesting issue, if marina fires and boat fires could be interesting. It was involved in a very small town, a sleepy town, that in the whole county, has less than 500 people during the off season. But about 2 months after this fire, suddenly about 15,000 people wind up being there throughout the summer, because they come in with their mobile homes and their trailers, travel trailers, and they have these big parks where they park. And it's a quaint little town. It literally has one. It's not even a stoplight. It's a caution light. So at an intersection. So it's a sleepy little place. But when we had this fire about 4 a.m. in the morning, it was discovered approximately 1 hour later at about 5 by a local resident who was awakened by an explosion. We think it was a propane tank, but we're not, at this date, we don't know for sure. She made a 911 call, which was coincidentally about the exact same time that one of the decedents actually made the call also. And this loss involved a lot of different parties, as you can see there. And this is an overview of the marina itself. At the bottom, I'm going to try to do this so that the people out of the room understand what I'm saying. The gray roofs at the bottom, near the bottom of the picture, are what we're going to call Shed A, and the gray roofs near the middle of the picture are Shed B. And you can see the floating docks at the end of Shed B with some sailboats and a powerboat or two. That Shed B is what's actually involved in the fire. The gray roof at the top left corner with a powerboat laying alongside the bulkhead is a restaurant, which became our command center, which is something that's pretty important to have. This is another view of the same thing, but from a different angle, showing this picture was actually taken in 2013, so about 2.5 years prior to the fire. It's important for those of you in the room and those listening, if you can see this, that there's a couple of small gray roof built shed-like buildings at the center of the picture to the far left. And there's one sailboat laying alongside and a motor vessel laying at the end. That's what we're going to call the Texaco dock, just for reference. It used to be an actual Texaco barge loading site, an unloading site. Excuse me. Later on in the presentation, you're going to see a view of the fire from the building on the right of those two buildings. That had become a private residence. Even though it was condemned, and it had a condemned sign on the building that existed after the fire. It was condemned prior to the fire by the city, but a man had bought it and had created his waterfront home there, if you will. So Shed B is the picture that we're looking at. It has elevated area that you can see. That's where the larger power boats were located on the what turned out to be the north side of the pier. At the bottom left corner of the shed itself, right against the parking lot, was a gazebo-like patio where it was screened in, and there's a barbecue grill there, and that will become important later on in the presentation. Here's an overview that we took actually we acquired, excuse me, we didn't take it, showing the area of origin. And the arrow is an approximate location of one of the vessels that was of key interest. If you look at the yellowed area, that's Pier A, that's the pier that remained after the fire and became an exemplar for the construction and wiring of Pier B for us. The squared or the rectangular area in yellow is the evidence laydown and storage area that we needed to create a pattern of where the evidence that we ultimately collected, was positioned, and we could identify fire patterns from that, and you'll see that more later. Oh, excuse me, one thing I want to do, very, very important, the wind direction. We were very, very fortunate, but the wind was, what the direction the wind was coming from in that particular morning. You'll see later in some pictures. It's obviously blowing the fire. It wound up blowing the fire and the smoke away from land and away from what's going to be a number of additional boats. This picture right here shows you its location and proximity to another marina in the forefront of the picture, which shows you that if the wind had been coming from 90 degrees to the east, it would have potentially caused a lot more damage. Also in this picture, you can see some houses near the middle upper left corner, and they're elevated in the photographs. Some of the photographs that we have of the fire first thing were taken from homeowners that lived in those houses. So what's involved, or what was involved in this particular fire, and why is this important? Ultimately, what I'm trying to talk to you about today is the complexity of dealing with all the different parties involved. And as you can read that list, there's so many folks involved, what was lost, and the different interests that we are concerned with. Obviously, human life was the most important. We did have 2 people who were staying on their vessel for about a 6-week period while their land-based condominium in town was being redecorated. And they unfortunately perished. And I'll talk to you a bit about that in a second. There was one near miss, which will become important later on also. So these are all the assorted parties that were involved in the loss. And I'm sure those of you who have been involved in fires recognize they are complex and there's potentially a lot of people. You know, if you have one boat that catches fire or sinks in your marina, it's one thing. You know, if it damages the boat alongside, maybe you have 2 insurance carriers, or maybe you have 3 with the marina if you damage the dock, but you don't necessarily have a lot. We had 24 vessels, 22 in the marina, 2 that were adjacent marina that got fire damaged from blowing cinders and such. So we wound up with only 16 carriers, and what we actually wound up with was 9 fire investigators and marine surveyors, which it's wonderful not to have a lot of people involved. On the other hand, it became a conflict of interest, because at that point when we first started, the boat USs of the world and the Geicos and so forth, State Farms, Farm Mutual, a few others, they called up surveyors. They said, would you represent us? Well, it's nice to get the jobs, but what if it's one of your companies that's responsible? You got a conflict right there and then, especially if it's going to go to court. So my first suggestion to all of you is represent one firm, because my job is to say, you did it, all right, ultimately, or you did it, and is to figure out what it is. Your boat did it. And if you're representing 2 firms, where do your allegiance lie? That's enough said. Okay, so as you can read from there were a lot of different organizations involved. The one that was probably the most stringent to deal with was the Coast Guard pollution control folks. They were on in a very nice way and very supportive, but on our backs from moment one. They were on site within 4 to 5 hours with a whole team. I was there just before they got there, and it's a situation where we had to develop a pollution control plan that literally went all the way to Washington to get final sign-off. This was an area within a confined creek that they were so worried that all the diesel fuel and gasoline was going to wind up damaging the environment. I mean, they had a team of about 8 people and 2 boats, and lots of booms and everything else on site very, very quickly. Fortunately, shortly thereafter, they started leading some of those folks home and letting them go home. The people drove in from different parts of the state and to be of support. You're all hearing me well, right? I hope. Okay, I'll get a little closer. Additionally, we had the deceased representatives, the children themselves came by. The local newspaper was on, the little local rag was there. Local townspeople, you'll see later on some of the pictures of where they were involved every day practically. Ultimately, we hired diving teams, a crane barge, trucks, and debris disposal, and for a whole variety of folks. And my own operation, I had a staff of folks, 3 or 4 people there at one time. Ultimately, we had 105 different organizations or parties that we had to coordinate and deal with and get people to buy off on. So, okay, the following are some photographs that were provided from a variety of people. Now, the timeline is 1 hour off. The lady who took this picture had her camera, hadn't adjusted the camera from spring to fall and so forth. So it's actually 5 a.m. at this time. The next picture you're going to see is the same pier, obviously, but from at the other end of it, the outer end. The interesting thing to note in both of these pictures, let me go back, is how much destruction has occurred since the start of the fire. And this picture was taken at, again, 5 a.m., even though it says 6, and it was taken before the fire truck. There is a responder there, but that guy, it's volunteer, and that was the local fire chief, and he got there very quickly. So it's before the fire department's gotten there, and it's effectively the whole thing has been, the roof is already down on top of the pilings and all the boats. The structure, the two-story structure at the far end is actually a clubhouse, four-walled clubhouse that's up on stilts, up on pilings, that you climb up a set of stairs, and they had a microwave and a kitchen refrigerator and some tables and chairs. You know, they used, this was on the end near the floating docks, so they would use it for parties and so forth. And that was of concern because we wanted to know when the last time it was used. Apparently, it's like a lover's lane also for some of the young local towns kids. So we were concerned that it might have been an issue of leaving a cigarette lit or whatever. But we soon, very quickly, ruled that out because A, based on these pictures, and B, based on the wind direction and how long the wind had been blowing at a 15 to 20 knot breeze all night long. So the fire could not have progressed toward shore within the period of time we're talking about. Another view of the ladder truck actually on site and doing its thing. Here's the old Texaco Depot little building. It caught fire from radiant heat, and firefighters are putting it out. And this picture shows the backs of the firefighters, but looking into the fire scene. And again, now it's about an hour later after the fire had started. I'm sorry, about 2 hours after the fire had started, about an hour after the first pictures, and you can see the total destruction of the marina. Yeah. Wood frame, yes. Yeah. The entire marina pier was all very old wood, 1935 to 1942, with modifications over time, with a metal roof, tin roof. No sprinkling, no. None of that was retrofitted, definitely not required by law. It would be nice to have, of course, but it wasn't. So this is just showing into the, this is like 6:30 in the morning. The wind is still blowing. Now it's actually changed direction slightly, so it's blowing more on shore, which became a bit of an issue. These pilings had been put in, majority of these pilings have been put in probably in the 70s. They were fully creosoted. They were amazingly intact below the waterline. Now this is shallow water. We're talking, which became another issue because with the divers, mean low water is about 4.5 feet. So most of these boats were definitely just sitting on the bottom. This view is from a hill of the adjacent marina, looking toward northeast, looking toward the fire. This picture is important because right in the center of the picture, you'll notice some fire, but you won't notice any to the left of it or to the right of it. There's a sailboat tied up at that where that fire is, and just to the left of that is a 39-foot O'Day, which looks like the bow is just starting on fire in that picture. You notice the Coast Guard boat just to the right in the center of the picture. We have other pictures that show that the 39-foot O'Day was not on fire when the Coast Guard was literally closer alongside the floating dock. For whatever reason, They chose not to touch either one of those two boats that were not even afire. They could have saved two boats by just letting them go adrift. But for whatever reason, they chose not to do it. So in this picture, now you can see the O'Day fully ablaze in the black smoke, and the other boat is sunk by now. Okay. Here's the pollution control boom. This is the next morning, and if you look, if you can remember where the O'Day was, and you look in that picture, right there, that's the radar mast of this O'Day sunk. So that's the only thing sticking out of the water. And again, two vessels could have been saved completely. But it's the way it worked. So where do you start when you get into something like this? It's obviously a big mess. And from an evidentiary point of view, if you disturb any of that, you can be claimed for having destroyed evidence. So what are we going to do? What is valuable here, or what is potentially valuable? So we had to set up a protocol and have everybody buy into it before we touched anything that said, this is how we're going to go about it. And we had at least 7 parties that we had to get to buy in, groups of parties, if you will. And each of them played a significant role. I wore the hat of the top guy, but we had our fire investigators, we had our electrical forensic engineers, we had fire propagation people, we had the local witnesses, the marine surveyors like yourselves, the Marina personnel, which were key to not only telling us about the design of the structure, the layout of the vessels, which vessels were actually there or should have been there, which is another point that I'll tell you later. And we needed to get into their records. We needed to find out if they had a financial problem. Maybe they didn't even have a financial problem, but they had a financial incentive to see the building go down so they could clear the space and sell it off as condominiums. There's all kinds of possibilities. So all these folks played a significant role, and they all had to buy in. If you see the guy in the bright yellow jacket near the top right of that picture, that's yours truly. So as I said, we had to establish a protocol, and that's really key. If you get everybody to buy in to the process up front, and you're very open, it's all going to go a lot easier for you. I wanted to create a sense of openness, and it's important that you think about if you don't hold things too close to the vest, you're all there to establish the truth. Why did the fire happen? Why did the loss occur? Whatever it may be, why did the boat sink? You don't really care what it is. If you've got multiple parties involved, if you all say, look, I'm going to take some photographs, you're going to take some photographs, you're going to have some notes, whatever it is, we're going to all upload them onto, we use Dropbox, but there's other sites, and we all had access to all of that information. The only thing that I would recommend that you do that we didn't do, we made the mistake of allowing people to be able to delete things. And not that they purposely deleted them necessarily, but maybe by mistake, some things got deleted. So fortunately, we didn't lose anything, but we had to go through some gyrations to recover. So let everybody upload it. It's all available to be seen. It's not going to go away. We had over 1 terabyte of information. We had videos that we created, and everything was there from day one to the end. Keep in mind, and as marine surveyors, all you know this, but keep in mind the boat owner has absolute right to his vessel more than the insurance company. So if Mr. Boat Owner maybe has insurance, maybe doesn't have insurance, says, I don't want you to touch my boat. I want it to stay right there underwater. That's his absolute right. Now, he gets superseded by the U.S. Coast Guard, who says, I want that derelict out of the water and as a pollution hazard, hazard to navigation. They have rights. But then the Coast Guard takes over control of it. There's a word for it. But if they take over control of it, they raise it and give the guy a bill for $350,000. So you got to remember to tell the owner, if you want to keep it, that's your right. But anyway, you're going to get a bill from the Coast Guard. Many times, I bring that up because many times we immediately think, oh, he's got insurance, so his insurance company has authority. They do not unless he signs it off. Keep that in mind. Something I learned by the attorneys. There were a bunch of them involved. So Coast Guard environmental team. I said this earlier, you've got to have a pollution abatement plan. It has to be signed off however far up they want to go.
If you deny access to the vessel as an owner, isn't there a possibility that the insurance company can cancel the?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let me speak to that. I'm not sure. And I will against it. The oldest, the idea of insurance is utmost in faith. You do not have access to the evidence, you don't. You can walk these things.
Because I got thrown off the boat one time, and that's all the insurance company had to hear.
That's all I need.
And they denied the claim.
Right. That's exactly right. I apologize for not bringing that up, that aspect of it, but they do have the right to throw you off or whatever, keep us up. Of course, the police are going to be very concerned when somebody says you can't go on board my boat that just burned up. Okay. In our particular case, we had a very small community. If you happen to have a marina fire that's in downtown Hampton or downtown New York City or downtown wherever, DC, you're going to have a situation where you're going to have to deal with other aspects. We had to get the community we kept the community involved. We literally had a meeting in a church where we brought everybody together. We dealt with the local newspaper. We dealt with the mayor, all the factors. We were concerned because we had this little tiny town that we knew we were suddenly going to have 18-wheelers pulling these large vessels through downtown, and we wanted to be sensitive to the local community's concern for the loss. They were friends of the people that passed away, and so we wanted to be sensitive to everybody's needs. So, but we got them involved ahead of time. We told them what we thought we were going to wind up doing, and we got them to agree and understand. Into the next item about gossip at the local hotspot. A little side note, I went to, there's a little drugstore called Marshall's. And it's an old-fashioned drugstore. I mean, you got the pharmacy counter on the back, you got the sandwich counter over here on the left. It's a serpentine counter with stools. And I walk in one day and I've got my safety gear on and I'm just going to go have some lunch. I sit down in a stool and all these women start looking at me, staring at me. And I thought, okay, they realize I'm new in town and I've got safety gear on. I must be here for the investigation. Well, unfortunately, I was sitting in Judith's stool, or on Judith's stool. And they told me, that's Judith's stool and she'll be here shortly. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And I got up and I moved around and everybody was happy and they smiled. And of course, then they wanted to know everything they could possibly learn from me. And there had been a published statement in the local newspaper of the first day after the fire that it was an arson-based fire, and that the way the newspaper reporter got that is because the State Highway Patrol Office public affairs officer mentioned that it could be arson, and that's what they had not released the site yet. Now the fire started at 4 a.m. on the 29th. They got that comment about noon. I was on site at about 12:30, and by 4:30, the police released the site to me completely. State Highway Patrol released it. There was no evidence of they brought the dogs in. There was just no physical evidence. Not that it couldn't happen, but they didn't have any reason to further believe that it was arson involved. So, but by that time, it was already getting published. So the world thinks it was arson at the time. So I had to quell that whole rumor pretty quickly. And I bring that little story up only to say it's important to control what the public thinks.
Who actually is the king of the kingdom of this project?
Me. As it turned out, I was brought in by the law firm that represented the insurance company, which was Chubb, that handled the whole thing. And the lawyer that represented, represented Chubb, right? The property owner themselves, the marina owner themselves, which was the LLC, had their own separate lawyer also, who was on site practically every day. Yes, sir.
What was Chubb? Who did they represent? Who were
The marina owner.
Marina owner?
Yeah, the marina itself. They covered the marina. Yeah. There was some liability coverage from a separate another law or insurance company, but no one. Well, they were involved because the two people got killed.
Well, the reason why I was asking that question is because we had all those other entities involved.
Right.
There was always this ego or arrogance part of, I'm responsible for this. We're just talking about the point of who released the information to the press. The press information was incorrect or inaccurate, which pushed a whole other level of restoring the faith in what you were doing to make sure that you had the best information, accurate information to release to the public.
Well, very good point. The original story was just gotten by this reporter speaking to the highway patrol officer. Okay, that was before I was involved per se. All right, I think, and she just went with it, and so once it was published, we had to, the attorneys who were the responsible people, actually coordinated a meeting with the townsfolk, and that's when we talked to them about what as many of the facts as we knew them to be. Okay, and we clarified the fact that there was no indication of arson. I later went so far as to connect with the security people with BB&T, which is the large banking facility organization in this area, out of Charlotte, and there was a branch bank on the street just outside of the entrance to this marina. And I wanted to get the footage from their night ATM cameras. And I got it, and they understood what I was doing, and all I cared about was, did some vehicle drive into this marina and out of it sometime during the middle of the night? And we viewed what we could see, and there was nothing that we could. We saw one truck go through like hours earlier, so it didn't go in the marina. So we try to bring in as many of the community as we can. We look at all of the available cameras and security footage and whatever might be available to eliminate possibilities. Because when you have a total loss like this, all you're doing is eliminating things and then zeroing in on what remains and then trying to come down to one potential hypothesis. Evidence recovery, very key in my realm, not necessarily important in yours maybe, but in our realm, again, we have this, I have a 6-page, in my bag, 6-page protocol for how we went about recovering. We established it. It was part of the contract with the general contractor. We established the hierarchy, if you will, and then I instigated the fact that we were going to video document everything from the moment the crane barge started its engine to the end of it, so that we had hours and hours of tape, and we had someone who was dedicated just doing that. And again, that was put on the website, or not, I'm sorry, the storage site, and available to everyone. Those of you who, any of you know about 921? Okay, great. Well, those of you who are not familiar with it, it is now the guide, Bible, and law, and referred to in law, but of the standard of how to identify, collect, tag, and store physical evidence. And if you don't do this, if your people don't do this, it will most likely be not allowed to be used in a courtroom. And this edition, 2014, is the year at which it's become really the standard. It was available before that, and the 2017 editions come out, but 14 is when it changed. So this is the key. Whoever, if you do it or if you get involved in another fire, make sure they become very, very familiar with the process in 921. It talks about scientific method. It's a systematic approach on how to identify, refine, and define the problem itself and move forward in collecting the data, analyzing it, developing the hypotheses, and then ultimately, if let's say you have three things you think it could be, A and B and C. Well, if you get to only A, maybe you can eliminate one of those, but you're down to two, and you can't go any farther. So what do you guys think we have at that point? What kind of fire or loss would we have? There you go, exactly, and that's what it becomes. That is an actual type, a category of fire or loss, undeterminable fire. There's nothing wrong with coming up with that answer, because it means that too much of the evidence has been affected or lost completely to be able to make a completely determinable decision. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
That'd be easy for fire investigators for the longest time.
Yes. Well, to your point, while it gives permission to say we can't come to a definitive answer, it also puts responsibility on the investigator to do it in a very systematic way, not to give up. I mean, it's not a license to just say, oh, I can't find any more, so I don't know. Currently, I believe the statistic is, at least in the United States, there's approximately 33 to 35% of all claims fires are undeterminable. That's before this version of 921. I don't know what it's going to. I don't know what it's going to wind up doing with that statistic, but I suspect if people are following the systematic approach and performing the scientific method, the number should go down. But there's always will be undeterminable.
This is a big fire, obviously, and requires a lot of investigation. But when it comes to the fire, isn't there a point where the cost benefit trying to find out what it is, unless it involves
well, there's no question that you wouldn't necessarily need 105 people or parties involved in a one boat fire, two boat fire. Where do you say you don't necessarily need a whole team of anybody. You wouldn't have necessarily the whole highway patrol officers and all the community involved and so forth, depending on where the marina is. But the issue is, where do you say I'm going to cut the corner, cut the cost, and not come up with the answer, when in fact that might have been an arson situation? Or a carrier, hypothetically, let's say a refrigerator on board, electric refrigerator on board a cruiser catches fire. And for those of you who are from around here, you may realize that there used to be a problem with electric refrigerators. Well, what if that was the problem, and that is some carrier can realize I've got a fleet of boats out there that I insure that has the same kind of a refrigerator in it, and they've got all this exposure. Well, they're going to want to have some action taken, I assume, that's going to potentially mitigate the potential for further loss. So there's in my forensic work in general, what we find is carriers will say, I want you to spend the extra $1 on a hot water tank fire that might lead me to save 50 other houses across the country. So I think that is the only answer I can give you. But yes, you got to make a dollar and cents decision. I'm not going to get into all the details of 921 other than to say that it is a very systematic process. There's legal considerations. There's a separate chapter 30 on marina fires themselves, marine fires investigation, excuse me. My associate, Chris Graham, and I are planning on talking to NFPA about doing a chapter specifically on how to do marina fires. This is a compilation of the types of things that we looked at very specifically: the structure, the design of the structure, the arrangement of the electrical system, the shore power arrangements, the plumbing. Was there Wi-Fi? Was there phone lines, which there were? And why is that important? Not so much for the electrical aspect, but we wanted to know what group of wires that are all mismatched at the bottom of the harbor there. When we picked them up, what were we looking at? We wanted to know, were there phone lines? Were there data lines? Were there whatever? Because when we picked all of this stuff up, gentlemen, we looked at every single inch of wire, every single inch of hose, piping, anything we could pick up. We looked, all that tin that you saw in one of those pictures, we looked at every inch of that. Collectively, we looked, it's all bent up and it's hanging by a crane or whatever. We put it on the ground. We looked at for fire pattern. We looked for arcing. We were wondering whether or not the fire may have started up high in the roof and from the lighting system, for instance. So anyway, all of that's necessary. As soon as we cleared one piece of tin, it went into a dumpster and off it went. So we were able to agree to do that, and because we had a small work site. But again, the list here shows you all the different things that were of concern and that our investigation had to evolve. We went into the call logs. I mentioned earlier that one of the decedents had made a call about simultaneously with the first call. This lady, unfortunately, she and her husband passed away. They were staying on their boat, as I said earlier, while their condominium was being redone. She gets up for some reason, we don't know why. She makes a 911 call, and I've heard the call, and she was as calm as you and I are right now in this conversation. She was saying, I'm calling to let you know that the marina that I'm in, or the one next door, is on fire, and I just need to let the fire department get here. And suddenly she realizes the fire is overhead on their 46-foot hatteras, and she starts screaming to her husband, "We got to get out of here! We got to get out of here!" I mean, this is all within like 12 seconds, folks. And they ultimately found the two of them in the water, face up, slight burns on them, just slight. One was 67 and one was 70, I think. The water temperature was 38 degrees. They died of hypothermia, heart attack, combination of all the above. Their vessel was found about 300 yards away, sunk on a sand barge, completely down to it was underwater completely. There wasn't anything left. Most of the vessels literally were burned to the chine, not just to the water line, but down to the chine, because as debris fell onto them, they listed one way or the other, and the fire was burning both from the top down with the radiant heat from the metal and from the water up, because the petroleum products were dispersed all over the water. It turned out to be a good thing and a bad thing, but it did happen. Okay, here we go. I talked more. We created all kinds of diagrams and so forth, and did fire dynamics. And fire dynamics is mapping of the fire spread itself from one direction to the other. We also know, because of her call, they couldn't get off the boat. So that told us we know where her vessel was located, approximately, well, instead of my picture, about a third of the way out on the port side. under the higher roofs of the shed. And what we know from that is that because they couldn't get off their boat and walk down the dock, that the fire, at least at that point in time, was between them and land. So that's why she thought they had to get their boat out from under the cover. This is a picture of the laydown, what we call the laydown area of the evidence on the far side of shed A. I showed you in the early picture, I showed you a yellow rectangular box, and this is that area where we took evidence that the divers collected underwater, and we laid it out in the approximate position it was found with respect to shed B, where the fire was, so that we could look for, like for instance, these coils of line, cable, that is the power cable from the telephone pole to the shed building itself, okay? On the pallet, where the plastic bin is the actual circuit breaker box of that, where that cable was connected on the wall of the shed of the pier, if you will, where the power came in and was then distributed. So we laid all the evidence out all the way down to the far end in the approximate location with respect to each other, so that we could look for fire spread and damage and so forth. Yes.
Obviously didn't include the boats.
Not there. Okay, this is a picture of one of the divers showing a particular slip. Slip number 2. It was a 30-foot boat, and it had the name of the boat on it. You can see the slings. The PVC pipe is one of the 2 implements that we used. We have PVC pipe in the 4 corners. We placed them in the 4 corners of each slip, so that as we went from slip 1 to 2, we moved the pipes so the divers would know where they were located, orient themselves from the barge. As we were taking video, we were able to identify what things came out of the water as the boat was being lifted. If it fell into the water, we could go back and say that compressor or whatever it may be, we picked it up and put it back onto the proper boat. So we had some of that. You can see the bow of a particular sunken vessel there. This is that particular vessel. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not. This is a 37-foot bayliner. This is the vessel that the gentleman who was the near miss, and I'll tell you the story, owned. He owned 2 vessels. They were slipped next to each other. This one was relatively new to him. It wasn't a new vessel. He had dinner, was a good friend of, and had dinner with the decedents. It's the couple that passed away. And he was going to stay on his boat, this boat, that night. He actually went aboard, and about 10 or 10:30, his wife called him and said, "I want you to come home." I don't remember the exact reason she gave him, but she said, "I need you to come home." He left off the boat, went home, and this is what happened that next morning, and he wouldn't be with us today if she hadn't made that call. So he's a very lucky man. This is another vessel that's on board, was offloaded onto, or lifted and put onto the barge. You'll notice the spreader, rectangular spreader bar system that we used. Very important if you're lifting something like this. The boats were very fragile. We had to de-water them as they were coming out of the water before we could lift them free of the water surface. That's when we sucked any potential pollutants out of their tanks, and also got as much water off of them as possible, let them drain. We're talking 30 minutes to an hour sometimes, letting it drain and drain and drain, because we were afraid of collapsing the hull, and that's why we use such a wide spreader bar system. This is that same vessel being offloaded on shore for transport to this location, which was just outside of town. We rented 2 acres. We fenced it in, and we laid down the poly sheathing and laid these 8x8s down to identify different slip locations. So what we did is we'll get to a final picture later. This is slip 1 right against the bulkhead, as you can see. This is a 30-foot Grady White. As you can see, again, where it burned down to the chine from having healed over. And in the background, you can see guys in their orange vest from the Coast Guard, the pollution folks, and then you can see the 3 or so ladies, the community gossip patrol. They were very friendly, but they were there to see what was going on all the time. We used a drone for multiple reasons, and this is an overview. After all the vessels have been removed, we pulled all the pilings, but we're not quite finished. I think about half of the 3/4 of the pilings are pulled, but you can see the distribution of the pollutant booms. Now, here you go. This is what we created onshore to look for fire patterns. Slip 1 is at the top right-hand corner. As you can see, that was that Grady White. We put each vessel in its proper orientation as it was found out and taken out of the water. While they are slightly closer together than they actually were in the marina, we only had so much room to deal with. So there's a crossbar in the middle that we use as a reference scale for the drone picture. This is a small 19 or 21-foot bayliner right here. This is the big fishing vessel. I think that was 46 or 7 feet. This is the vessel right here that the decedents were on. Then at the far left bottom corner is actually a dumpster that has the 29-foot Erickson that burned at the outer floating docks in it. Okay. So, matter of fact, the motor on that was like a 9.9 or something. On the back of that Erickson was in perfect condition. The owner took it home. We were sentimental to the folks that and this is something you need to keep in mind. We made sure the insurance company would release for salvage value, any salvage value, all the props, helms, anything that might have been sentimental to the owners. So we had a special day where we had all the owners on the rock who were interested come, and I walked with them, and they said, I would like that propeller. I would like this little plastic or little ceramic cup or whatever it might be. And we collected that afterwards, and we arranged to get those things to them. Quite surprisingly enough, most people didn't want much. The boat, it's the top level far left, and that was a very old boat called the Colonel. It was handmade by some family members of the woman who currently owned it. And as that vessel was being raised, the boat was built, it was like 1937 or something like that. And as it was being raised, the owner's cabin being aft had a lot of hand-carved scroll work, things that would be more typical of a Trumpy or a Richardson or something. And there was a brass key, a typical skeleton key, about this big, that went to the locker, hanging locker in that cabin, and it was just laying on top of what was the locker. And as the boat's coming out of the water, I see it. So before we potentially lost it, I grabbed it. It was just remarkable that it was there. And that particular vessel, which was the oldest one in the harbor, which was the most sentimental in the harbor, sunk early because some piling dropped down off of the burning rafters, went through the deck and through the hull, and allowed the boat to sink early so that it only burned to the guns. And while it was charred, it could have been rebuilt by a very qualified woodworking carpenter. But they chose, it would cost much, much more than it was possible worth. So anyway, those are the kind of sentimental things that we dealt with too. So what kind of problems did we encounter? These are the things that would be very typical for many of you. Time of year. In our case, it was February, late February, March. It went from cold one day, I mean snowing one day, to the next we're in shirt sleeves, literally. We had lack of daylight to begin with. We tried to work a 12-hour day, 6 days a week. We had the conflict of interest issues, having the adjusters and surveyors representing more than one carrier. But we got through that. We got the initial time that it took to get all of the parties involved and to agree. And it took 30 days. From the, I didn't start the actual excavation until the 1st of April. And I had 30 days. I told them I'm out of here in 30 days. And I was out of here in 29 and a half days. I went back to meet the people to give them their things, but the excavation work was all done. Lack of security cameras in the marina itself or in the area, so we were a little blind. We didn't have early witnesses. I mean, other than the woman that woke up at 5 o'clock and called the fire department, we didn't have anybody at 4 o'clock or see around the time the fire initiated. Of course, you rarely have that. We also had a claim administrator out of New York who was brought in initially, who I saw him once, I saw his representative once, and I never saw them again. And they held up all kinds of things. And nobody needed them. I don't know why they got brought in by Chubb, but my point is, try not to get too many people involved if you can. And the thing that I'm going to leave you with is that you can only do what you can do. As much as we get into this, and in our case, we like to solve puzzles, and you want to get right down to the nitty gritty. To your point earlier, you can only go so far, and we have limitations. So, any questions?
So the cause of that fire was never determined?
Officially,
What was it?
I cannot tell you. I can tell you that because of the drone images. Matter of fact, let me go back, if I may. Do I have a couple minutes? Or let me just show them one thing. All right, look at this picture. I'm going to cut things short. Look at the top row. Look at about between the sixth. Well, if you look in the middle, what do you see?
They're all burnt.
They're all burnt. That's right. I'm going to really cut this short. All right. Right in here. Right in here. What do you see?
Fire going each direction.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And we took that drone and we not only did this overall aerial, but we also zoomed into each vessel, right above each vessel, and then in between each vessel, purposely to look for burn patterns that we couldn't see in the water. And remember I told you there, well, I haven't told you this story. There was that vessel right there. It was owned by a gentleman who normally kept the boat at his house, in his dock, behind his house, on the river. Because it was wintertime, last November, or the November prior to the fire, he brings the boat over to this marina and sticks it underneath and takes his insurance off. Cancels his insurance for the winter, thinking, oh, it's safe, it's undercover. You know, it's not going to sink for snow or ice. So, of course, the fire starts, and the boat's uninsured, and he also had a heater aboard, okay? And that's as far as I'm going to go. And his wife comes over, and she's mad as heck because, first of all, he doesn't have any insurance, and why didn't you leave it at the house? She wants, it's part of my willingness to give people their sentimental things. She literally wanted me to cut off the entire bow structure, anchor platform and all that, which was not damaged. She wanted all the chrome fittings, the hinge, not chrome, stainless steel and polished chrome fittings for hinges, cleats, all that. She wanted it all taken care of. She wanted to give it to her daughter for yard art. I said, ma'am, if I cut off this bow, which you can have it. It's going to weigh 500 or 600 pounds. You're going to need a crane to come in here and take this puppy out. I'm not taking it in. The insurance companies weren't even that committed. Finally, they didn't take it. But my point is, some people were ridiculous, and there was the boat was uninsured, and that is, to your point, the potential area of start. Okay, so, but to your question, it was an undetermined fire because we could not. Pardon me?
Who paid the salvage bill on that?
Each insurance company paid their own salvage. They had to. They had to pay for disposal of the boat, and I've forgotten the total number, but the bill was about 1.6 million for the investigation. That's not the loss now. That's just the investigation portion, and the crane and the divers and all that stuff. And they had to pay. They were on the hook for their 222nd one out of 226, 22 boats. So they had to pay their about a fourth of their share.
Were you able to get satisfactory answers from owners about who did have heaters on, who didn't? Were you able to find remnants of heaters that hadn't been reported? Were they plugged in? How many questions were left unanswered? Or anomalies?
All the above.
All the above, seriously, because their contract with the Marina said no heaters. Okay? But we did find heaters. Now, we can't prove, we could not prove they were plugged in. All right? Can't, just because you have a heater, I got heaters on my boat,
Right.
literally. But
There wasn't enough left to
yeah, the wires are off. You know? And just because there's a wire there doesn't mean it was physically plugged in or had energy to it. So, yeah. Yes.
Was every other boat that were insured?
Every other one
Except the one.
except that one was insured. Yeah.
The insurance company was looking at it.
I'm sorry, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Don, Dr. Kochan didn't say, and we all learned early in the career, you never burn your own boat.